This is Tia Butts. I'm here with ToutSuite at the Napa Valley Film Festival, and we are taking an opportunity to talk with Justin Chang, who is the movie critic, the film critic at Variety Magazine.
Hello.
Hi, Justin. Thank you so much. I found so many of the things that you said on the panel today super interesting because there are many, many similarities between, I think, what wine critics are hearing right now and food critics possibly even, as well as what you're going through, which is this elitist versus populist view, and with the changing social media and everyone becoming a critic, I think traditional criticism is really under fire right now. I mean, where do you see traditional criticism moving in the future?
I think that I cling to the hope that there will always be a place for it. Whatever happens with newspapers, with magazines, I have to believe that people with meaningful things to say, and people who have given their lives to the study of food or visual art or wine or film, whatever it is, I've always felt that criticism is like an obsession. It just won't leave you alone. You can't leave it alone, and if you're meant to do it, you will find an outlet. That's, and I say that as someone who's been very fortunate to have that outlet myself. And it's interesting because, I consider myself a very budding but very amateur connoisseur myself when it comes to the wine world, and I'm always floored by people who can describe food to the degree they do, who can describe wine. I very much lack the critical vocabulary for that, developing it maybe years from now, but it's I just find it kind of sad that people would look to people who have an expertise in something and be offended or annoyed or contemptuous about that. I think people know more than me about things. People know more than you about things. Deal with it, so yeah.
And well, so let's dive into that for just a moment, because I think also what happens sometimes in the wine world is that, again, it's the elitist view. They see that these critics have an opportunity to maybe taste wines that are extremely rare, or that they will never get their hands on, or that are very, very expensive. And I don't know how similar it is in the film world, but I'm looking at things like, the very, very small short film that may never make it to your town versus the big blockbuster movie that has all kinds of financing behind it. So how do you as a critic balance looking at all things fairly?
That's a very interesting question, I think, and there definitely isn't a kind of an equivalency there between, and it's sort of the equivalent, I guess, would be the, whatever it is, the Taiwanese or the Iranian or the film from Afghanistan that is playing at a far-flung festival somewhere, and but the difference is, it's interesting. I'm sort of guessing. There's sort of with wine, sometimes there can be a financial constraint, I'm just imagining. With film, perhaps, if they can, for the most part, no such constraint exists. If they can show the film, if they can put it on Netflix or something or whatever, you have access to it. And it's like, so my role as a critic, and one of my favorite things to do, is to champion those types of things. And I go to festivals, so I'm often seeing these films before they are presented to the public in a meaningful way. And so, I'm very aware that sometimes a positive review in my publication, Variety, can help a film be seen by more people. It can also do the opposite, So it's very tricky. You always kind of, and the festival kind of is its own environment that, with its own politics and everything, and it's important to be aware of those things. But in general, that's really where you feel you can make a difference. I think the things that I'm most proud of among them are just that little film that nobody saw that was spectacular, and that I was pleased to be able to say that it was, and hopefully even attracted a few more eyeballs to it. So, yeah.
Do you feel like the traditional critic, that maybe writes for a publication, magazine, is still able to reach the millennial generation today? There's a lot of conversation, again, in the wine world, and you touched on it a little bit today about social media, and there was recently an article in the Wall Street Journal that quoted some new data, at least for wine, talking about how most millennials are going to the internet or talking to their friends, and that very, very few of them are actually subscribing to a publication or reading the traditional critics. So how is that affecting your world?
I always sort of panic at the relating to millennials question. I wonder where on that generational spectrum I even fall. I'm kind of confused myself. And as someone who does, I've subscribed to the New York Times. I feel like I'm a fan of traditional media, but even I feel inundated just by the amount of chatter that's out there. And I think, and I don't want to disregard the chatter. I think that all of this is criticism. Read your tweets, read from your friends, and talk about those, and argue with the critics by all means. No one has to agree with them, but it's just criticism to me is just it's a conversation, and so the more voices there are, the better, I think. And so I don't think that traditionally. It's a hard thing, I think, because
okay, well,
it's a real, because I think that I do mourn sort of, a lot of the traditional critics out there in my field, especially in film, who, people who are superb at their jobs and who no longer have them. I mean, that's it's an unfortunate thing, and you hope that the tide will turn for them. So, and for myself and for all of us, so.
There was mention today of there's a question asked, what direction is criticism today moving in, or where will it be 10 years from now? Using yourself as an example, are you finding that you're going online more? Are you having more open back and forth conversations? Are you hosting forums with people who read your column to talk about films?
Well, for sure. I mean, I am doing, kind of what Amy Nicholson was saying. You have to do everything. I don't know if I do everything, but I'm on the radio a lot more than I used to do, which is a great thing to do. It's just a different set of muscles, and I love doing radio, occasionally on TV, that kind of thing, and writing. And so, yeah, I think, and it's funny because I don't, I like to engage readers. At the same time, I think everyone kind of has to figure out their own. If you're a critic, you have to kind of figure out what persona you're going to have. And I think for me, it's like part of a critic's persona, what makes a critic compelling is a certain amount of mystique. And that kind of goes away if you're just oversharing, So for me, it's like, I think if you read me, if you read somebody, what you get a picture of where they're coming from. And that's, and you get to know a person that way, I think. And that's kind of what I like to offer of myself.
Wonderful. And one last question, what is it that you love about what you do?
Oh my God. There's so many things, but I really it's just that feeling that even when it's funny because people often ask me, or they assume, oh, you have the greatest job ever because you're just watching movies, and they're right, they're not wrong, but my job is also, I do editing, I have a desk job just like everyone else, and I see a lot, and you believe me, you don't want to see a lot, you don't want to see every movie. That's like, it's not some gift, but at the same time, it is a great job, and it's just kind of the feeling that I usually get, which is, this is really hard, I'm so tired of these deadlines, but you know what? I can't imagine myself doing anything else. It is that kind of feeling where you feel like, yeah, I was made to do this. And I think where that comes together for me is just the writing. I think to be able to write something or put something together that will hopefully have lasting value, we hope, there's just an incredible satisfaction in that. It's, and seeing, you look back and, oh, I have this body of work, and, I've written this and that, and it's really, really satisfying.
I'm going to take back my words. I'm going to ask you one more question that I really wanted to know, which is, you talked about the sort of visceral, uncontrollable feeling that overcomes you when you see something and you instantaneously like it or dislike it, or think you're going to like it or dislike it. And going back and reviewing something a second time, we often hear wine writers do that, but usually it's a negative connotation. When we hear them talking about tasting it twice, it's usually when they're publishing a negative review. And I don't know if that's out of fear of backlash or what for the negative review, but do you call it out even when you give a positive review? I mean, how does that work for you in the film world?
Do you mean like in terms of if I have a change of opinion or something? Yeah.
If you have a change of opinion, or if you liked something that you really didn't think you were going to like, are you open about that in your column?
Yeah, for me, if I were writing a column or something, I could probably be, a little more off the cuff, but, I write for Variety, which is still, so there's, I'm rarely writing in the first person, so it's, which is not to say my criticism isn't personal. It's just you have to kind of couch it in a way that's so that it kind of comes through. But so generally I'm not calling that out so much. But if I ever, and I've certainly changed my mind about certain things. Or I wish it's usually a matter of just like emphasis. Oh, I wish I'd emphasize this a little differently. hard to. I can't off the top of my head think of something that I've just had a complete 180 on. But I think it's important, because people change, movies change. That kind of visceral reaction that you kind of claim to have is like, well, that's something that, is by its very nature sort of kind of whimsical. And, some people will say that they are stuck in their ways. Pauline Kael, kind of the great film critic, was always, said she never watched a movie again. She always stuck to her gut, and that gut reaction was what she wrote from, and that's great, and that works for her. But that's not the only way to do this, so, yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, Justin Chang from Variety Magazine. We really appreciate you. Thank you.